Previously on Civic SciTV Africa with Stephanie Okeyo.
I think storytelling is really powerful, and then it becomes even more powerful when you create a mechanism and a platform and a system where people can tell their own stories. So our films are all made by the young people that we work with, and we're very firm on creating a space for young people to tell the story from start to end so that it's their own stories. And I think that's really powerful because when you then use that in a screening about a particular healthcare issue, be it TB, be it diabetes, be it cancer, when people see people that look like them reflected on the screen and talking about issues that resonate with them, it makes people feel very comfortable then to discuss and to have dialogue. And I think that's really, really, really powerful.
Hello, today we are joined by Ogechi Ekeanyanwu. She is a science and development journalist based in Lagos, Nigeria, with over 12 years in journalism, and she's the regional coordinator for the Science Development Network, SciDev, a non-profit organization bringing science and development together through news, views, and analysis. Thank you, Ogechi, for joining us. Could you tell us more about the work you do at SciDevNet?
Okay, so I'm the regional coordinator of Sub-Saharan Africa, SciDevNet. So Sub-Saharan Africa Anglophone, which means that I lead the affairs of all the English-speaking countries in the region in terms of science news reporting. So we do both text and podcasting. What SciDev really does is to ensure that science news from the region is covered in depth. So we do analysis, we do news, we do explainers. We just make sure that when it comes to Sub-Saharan Africa, we are on top of the science news. We talk to the experts who give us insight into what's going on in the science space in the region. We look at research papers. We look at research papers. We look at the journals. Oftentimes, all these papers of great work that scientists are doing in the region are tucked in these papers and no one is reading. And so what we do is try to give visibility to these papers. We also move on to trending news in the science space, and we cover with the intent to make sure that everybody understands the impact of the news in their lives. What we do, one of the strengths that SciDev has is that we simplify the news, the science news. We don't, in terms of jargons and the large words that scientists use that, the layperson may not be able to understand, we break it down. We ensure that anybody can go onto the SciDev website and read the science news and understand the import and the implication of whatever it is that we're reporting in their lives.
Mm-hmm. And in this case, with the work you do, who would you classify as your target audience?
Everyone is our target audience. I'll first of all say we target the people in Sub-Saharan Africa, the person on the streets, for instance. We also target policymakers. We target scientists. So anyone can come to the SciDevNet website and read the news and understand it. The reason I say policymakers is because at the end of the day, we want the policymakers. So what we do, we constantly engage with policymakers, governments, authorities in these countries who can engage the science that we're reporting and make the policies that are favorable to people in the society. Because what we do is science for development. So we don't just do science in abstraction. We make sure that it is for the development of the people who are listening or who are watching or who are reading the news on our site. So for us, first of all, it's the general public, anybody. We always say that when we are editing our stories, we always say we want a 13-year-old to go onto the website and read and understand science. Mm-hmm. So we first of all focus on the public, general public. Then we think of policymakers. We think of policy influencers, including the scientists themselves. And then we think of governments and authorities. Mm-hmm. These are targets.
And as a science journalist who's been in this space for over a decade, what has been your insights in terms of covering sub-Saharan news within the science and development space?
What would I say? First of all, I would say that there's a lot going on in the science space in Sub-Saharan Africa that people don't know or people don't realize. And that's why we're trying to showcase all the work going on in Sub-Saharan Africa at SciDevNet. The one thing that I would say is a challenge for us at SciDevNet is speaking to the scientists. We find that there is a strained relationship between journalists and scientists. And that's something that that's the bridge that we're trying to build at SciDevNet, where we have access to our scientists who are willing to talk at such short notice, because as you know, news is breaking, and the urgency of news sometimes requires the experts that we're reaching out to speak at such short notice. And oftentimes they're not available, or they're not willing to speak. And so that's one of the insights I can say. That's one of the challenges I can say that we have as science journalists, getting willing experts and scientists who understand the issues to speak. We also have a case where we also have the situation where the governments or the authorities in charge of, say, health ministries, but just generally science, want to sometimes will speak, but will not give us critical insights. They just basically want to whitewash what is going on. Mm-hmm. So those are some of the issues that we encounter. But, at SciDevNet, what we do is critical reporting. So we ask the tough questions, we ask the hard questions. And because we have reporters, so SciDevNet uses a network of freelance reporters in Anglophone-speaking Sub-Saharan African countries. A lot of them are experienced reporters, and all of them are great reporters. So, and then we also have the editors in-house who guide them on the kind of questions that we're seeking, on the kind of reports that we're seeking, so that we're not just reporting he said, she said kind of news, but we're going into the topic and we're really treating them in depth. And so one of the issues that we hear from our reporters is reaching out to the scientists and not getting the kind of feedback or the kind of response that they would like to get. So what we definitely, so it's a back and forth with the reporters and the experts, especially when it's not breaking news, or especially when we're trying to do an in-depth reportage. So yeah, these are some of the issues or challenges that we can face. However, there's a lot going on in the science space. In some countries, particularly, we're thinking South Africa, we're thinking Kenya, and even Nigeria. So many great stuff coming out from these countries. When we think of, I remember in 2022 when we did some monkeypox reporting, and then we interviewed an expert in Nigeria who had been researching monkeypox for years, but because at that time it had spread into countries of interest, countries that, let's say, richer countries, countries that are higher income countries, and then, it was designated public health, a disease of public health concern, something like that. So they were getting, they had to reach out to him to give some expert advisory on this issue, because that was something that was already happening here and he had already been doing research. So there's a lot going on here that people that we are trying to uncover and give visibility to at SciDevNet. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of reporting, SciDevNet has used the traditional means in terms of articles, events, such as conferences, and recently has moved also into podcasting with the Africa Science Focus program as our podcast in this case. What made that move? Why did the organization make that move?
We wanted to reach as many people as possible. So with the podcast as well, we have radio partners. And we are also getting more radio partners involved. So that means that we're reaching a new set of people who typically won't read or who don't have access to the internet, but have access to the radios in their various communities or localities in rural areas. So we wanted to reach these people. As we said, one thing that SciDevNet prides itself in is being able to simplify science news and getting anyone to understand science. And so that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to be able to reach a different set of people who may not want to read the text, but who still need to get science news, because really, what can people do without science? And so that was the reason that we moved to podcasting, but also podcasting or radio, because as I said, it's not just podcasting that we do. We do podcasting and we broadcast, and you will find us wherever you listen to your podcaster. But we also partner with radio stations. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to create content. We wanted to diversify our content as well, besides getting it onto radio stations. We wanted to make sure that we were doing true multimedia journalism. So it's not even just podcasting. We also create content for our social media. So from these podcasts and our text, we have videos. We have videos for our social media content, even for TikTok. So that also was a way for us to get young people interested in science. And we thought that this is a new space for us, a budding space in science journalism that we wanted to enter. And so that's why we moved into that space.
And it's interesting that you brought in radio, because when people generally think of podcasting, it's either podcasting or radio. So you are in this space of merging the two. And how do you typically, or did you start first of all with podcasting and then get into the radio, or you do the podcasting separately and sending it as an episode? Just generally for people who are not familiar, how they're merging the two.
Okay, I'll say, first of all, I didn't establish the podcast, but I know that what happened was that it was done simultaneously. So they started so this podcast started, the Africa Science Focus podcast. It's in its 4th edition now. And I started in the 2nd edition. And the podcast started, and we had radio partners involved from the start. So it was done simultaneously. When we started the podcast, the idea was to also get it on radio. We were going to kill two birds with one stone, and we're going to get it on radio, and we're going to also get it onto our online spaces as well.
And when you look at Africa Science Focus, what have been the big insights working within this space? If you compare it with either journals or articles or events.
Okay, so for the Africa Science Focus, we have several series. So the last season, we had an explainer series. We also had a change maker series. Now, the explainer series, as I said, is something that we were already doing via text, but we will take a topic of interest, a trending topic, for instance. We will take a topic that was very important for people to understand. We will take an issue and dissect it. We will get to the expert who will break down the issues and explain it in such a way that everyone understands. Again, that's what the explainer was. We will bring it up. We'll bring up all the points. For instance, if we were talking about, I think there was a time where we did something on female genital schistosomiasis. Now, this is not female genital mutilation. This is FGS, which is different. And then not many people had heard about it. It wasn't a top, it was, we'll call it an NTD, a non-tropical disease, for instance. And, you know, I remember when we did that episode, we got a lot of feedback saying that they didn't know about it. And there were so many misconceptions and myths. First of all, people thought it was a sexually transmitted disease, and it wasn't. It was waterborne. And there was also so much stigma attached to that disease because of the myth or the misconception that it was an STD. And we helped dispel that myth. So one of the things that the explainer episodes do is to dispel myths, to fact check issues, to explain issues, and to just basically make them well understood. So for giving the example of female genital schistosomiasis, we basically explain what it was, how it's gotten, the implications, all of that. And the feedback that we got from that episode, or from episodes that we do on the explainer episodes, is that people just come to us saying, oh, we didn't know this is what it was. And now we have a better idea of how either to prevent or to treat, those kinds of things. These are the reasons that we started the explainer seasons or series in the first place. And these were the feedback that we were getting. So it seemed like we were hitting the nail on the head. We were getting the results that we wanted to get from the series that we were producing, the episodes that we're producing for the explainer series. And then for the change maker, we basically would highlight, just as the name connotes, we would speak to change makers who are doing good work that was basically kind of solution journalism. We will speak to people who are doing scientists, people who are doing good work in the space, in health, in environment, and we will talk to them about the kind of work that they were doing. We will talk to them about the reason that they started the work in the first place, the problem that they encountered, that they saw and wanted to create change in. And we will talk to them about the process of creating the change, how effective that process was, how effective the outcome was, and what they needed to do to scale. And we're finding out that in the process of interviewing these change makers, we would find more change makers doing good work. And we would find people who wanted to amplify the work that they were doing, funders, grantors, and to scale the work that they were doing. So for us at SciDevNet and for the podcast team, what we are finding is that our work is impactful, and that's what we set out to do impactful work in science.
Mm-hmm. So in these, the different styles, the explainer, change makers, are the different angles in which different news and topics are brought in.
We have ones where we talk to science councils around Sub-Saharan Africa, and they tell us what they're doing in their councils. They tell us that is sort of like a measure of both the explainer and the change maker. But you see, that's their job actually. So we talk to the science councils and they tell us the work that they're involved in their various countries. And then they talk to us about the projects that they fund, the projects that they fund in higher institutions, in research institutions, and the work that is being done in those research institutions and the impact of the work that is being done in the research institutions. So far, those three series. So it's the Science Council series, the Change Maker, and then the Explainer series.
Mm-hmm. And what would you state as the challenges that were or you faced while starting or transitioning to a podcast?
I don't know if we faced any challenge. As I said, I think the major challenge that we face is getting people to stick to the timing appointment that we give, getting them to speak. But for the change maker, I would say, okay, sometimes for the change maker, what we used to do and what we still do actually is talk to the change maker, talk to the beneficiary of the project, and then talk to an independent expert who can look at the feasibility of the project of the change maker and see how it can be scaled, see how useful it is, all of that. Because as I said, we make sure that our reports are critical, and not critical of the person, but critical in the sense that we don't want petty reports on our sites, basically. So I think one of the problems that we face for the Changemaker series is getting beneficiaries to speak. And then it's even when it's not even a stigmatizing topic. First of all, we try to destigmatize issues using the science, but we occasionally would find issues with speaking with the beneficiaries of a project that the Chainmaker is carrying out. So majorly that.
And as a network working with different journalists, what will be your advice for science journalists trying to transition into podcasting space?
I think a lot of training. I think, first of all, do your research. It depends on the topic that you're taking, but research is always a good place to start for anything at all. For any science reporting, research is a good place to start. We would give you the same advice that we'll give a science reporter who's doing text. Do your research, understand the topic before you go and ask the questions. Make sure that you have your questions that are meaningful and will bring out the issues. Practice as well. Listen to other podcasts. Listen to podcasts, science podcasts that are notable. Listen to SciDevNet's Africa Science Focus. Listen to them to understand, first of all, the kind of questions. Basically, understand broadcast. The format of podcast is different, a little different from the format of text. So listen to the podcast and understand what it is that they're doing in these episodes or in the seasons or in the podcast that you're listening to. And then just go ahead and practice. I would say the transition, it won't be so hard if you already understand the science, if you already understand science reporting. Transitioning will just then mean that you would, again, as I said, do your research, listen to podcasts, do your pitches, and hopefully you have a good editor to guide you through the first work that you do.
And as we conclude, what do you think is required within the podcasting space for science and technology within region? If you look at Africa and all these science podcasts coming up, regardless whether it's institutional or individuals, as people supporting science journalism, science communication within this space, what are the key things you think will support science podcasters?
We need infrastructure, for instance. In many sub-Saharan African countries, there's power issues, electricity issues, things that's basic as that. Internet issues. So a lot of our podcasts are done via Zoom. And then oftentimes we want the internet to be stable so that we can run through the interview so that editing will be smooth. And then when the consumer is listening to the podcast, it just sounds good. And then that's often a problem. So sometimes we go back to our source and to have to redo some of these things, some of the challenges that we encounter. So generally, infrastructure, trainings as well. We know that we need our reporters trained in asking the hard questions. One of the things that I see or I hear, first of all, when I see a pitch, for instance, we do something where we say, what kind of questions do you want to ask? And when we look at the questions, where it's a bit, how do I put it? It's not the kind of questions that we would like asked. These are very obvious questions. So we would like for the reporter to understand the topic that he or she will be treating, so that when they're asking questions, when they're engaging with the expert, when they're engaging with whoever the source is, they're not asking watery questions. We would also like for gender-sensitive reporting. And this would include issues like making sure that when you're interviewing an expert, that you're deliberately, because of the lapses or because of the gaps already, the gender gaps that we see in the space in science journalism, that you're deliberately looking to balance any story or any report that you're doing, that you have women voices, for instance, because they are there, the experts are there, and you want to make sure that your reporting balance. Oftentimes, the issues that we're reporting affect women differently. So you want to make sure that for these reports, you are not looking at just men experts that are men, but you're looking at women experts, men experts as well. What else? Again, I say you cannot, what's it called? You cannot de-emphasize the place of research in podcasting or in doing any report. So I would say research, understanding just the little technical issues with podcasting as well. What is the format? Are you going to be doing interviews via Zoom? And then you have to invest in good internet, stable internet. Are you going to be going to the space where the expert is? Then you have to invest in proper recording tools. Yeah, so I guess that's it. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Ogechi.